Nevada's a lonely place to drive a truck. The 95 is a long black ribbon thrown over a landscape that God seems to have baked, cracked, and then forgotten about. For hours, the only company you have is the drone of your own engine, the shimmer of heat on the road ahead, and the ghosts of old towns that flicker past your window. I was hauling a load of industrial machine parts to Vegas, pushing hard to make up for a delay back in Reno. Then, about halfway to nowhere, the check engine light blinked on, with a kind of lazy finality that tells you your night is over. I managed to lift the rig into the next town, if you could even call it that. The sign said Eminence, which must have been some kind of a cruel joke. The place was little more than a sun-bleached gas station, a boarded-up general store, and a diner with a buzzing neon sign that had more dead letters than live ones. It was a town hanging on by a thread. While a greasy-handed mechanic was giving me the bad news, a faulty sensor that he'd have to order, I holed up in the diner. The only other person inside was a weary-looking waitress wiping down the counter. Small towns breed boredom, and boredom breeds stories. To pass the time, I asked if anything interesting ever happened out here. Her expression soured. "Depends what you call interesting," she said, not looking at me. A couple of weeks back, some kids broke into the old Carmichael place at the edge of town. They scared themselves half to death. The Carmichael place, she explained, it belonged to a reclusive old woman who made dolls, hundreds of them. When she died, the house was left to rot and filled with their porcelain creations. The local kids used it as a place to prove their courage. "So what happened?" I asked, sipping my burnt coffee. "The kids that went in swore the dolls had been moved around, arranged like they were having a tea party," she said, her voice dropping. "They ran out of there screaming. The next day, sheriff went to check. The front porch was covered in them. Maybe 50 porcelain dolls, all sitting in a perfect circle, staring out at the road." She paused, looking out the grimy window as if she could see the house from there. "Freaked everyone out," she said. "But here's the weird part. The sheriff locked the place up, planning to have the dolls cleared out. When he went back 2 days later, they were gone. All of them. Vanished. Not a single one left on the porch or in the house." I grunted. Kids. Probably the same ones who put them there the first place, trying to spook the town. She finally looked at me, her eyes tired but firm. "That's what everyone wants to think. But 50 dolls, that's a lot to move without anyone seeing. No tire tracks, no footprints. They just disappeared. It's like they walked away themselves." I paid for my coffee, scoffing internally. Small town legends. Every forgotten corner of America had one. Ghosts, monsters, or in this case, walking dolls. I was a man of steel and diesel, of timetables and invoices. I didn't have time for fairy tales. By the time the mechanic had my rig patched up enough to get to Vegas, the sun was setting, painting the desolate landscape in shades of blood and rust. I was glad to put Eminence and its silly story in my rearview mirror. I made it another 100 miles before pulling into a deserted rest stop to finally get some sleep. The story from the diner had faded from my mind, replaced by the more immediate concerns of my schedule and the hum of the highway. I climbed into the sleeper cab, kicked off my boots, and was about to fall onto the mattress when I saw it. Sitting propped up against my pillow, its little legs straight out, was a doll. It was an old porcelain thing, maybe a foot tall. It wore a faded blue silk dress that had gone gray with dust and age. Its hair was a matted nest of what might have once been blonde curls. But the worst part was its face. The porcelain was covered in a network of fine cracks, like a shattered mirror glued back together. Its cheeks had a faint rosy blush that had chipped away in places.
and its eyes, two painted blue circles under delicate lashes, seemed to be staring right at me with a look of serene, unblinking awareness. Its lips were painted into a tiny, knowing smirk. My first feeling wasn't fear, it was fury. The damned mechanic, one of his buddies, a little parting gift from the weirdos in Eminence, a stupid, childish prank to get a rise out of the outsider. I snatched the doll up. The porcelain was cold and heavy in my hand, far heavier than it looked. It felt solid like a piece of stone. I didn't even want it in my cab. I stormed out of my truck, strode over to the row of overflowing garbage cans, and shoved the doll deep into the foul-smelling darkness, burying it under fast food wrappers and empty oil cans. I felt a grim satisfaction hearing it clatter against the bottom of the steel drum. Problem solved. I slept badly, my dreams filled with the image of that cracked, smiling face. The next morning, I was woken by the rumble of the garbage truck making its rounds. I watched from my cab as the massive hydraulic arm lifted the dumpster, tipped it over, and compacted my unwanted passenger into a tomb of refuse. I saw it happen. It was gone for good. Feeling relieved, I hit the road. I put another 200 miles between me and that rest stop, crossing from Nevada into the sun-scorched emptiness of Arizona. The landscape changed, but the loneliness of the road remained the same. That evening, I pulled into a massive, brightly lit truck stop, a place bustling with life and noise. I figured I'd get a hot meal and put the whole strange episode behind me. I swung the passenger door open to grab my jacket, and my heart stopped. There, sitting perfectly upright on the passenger seat, facing forward as if it was enjoying the view, was the doll. It wasn't dirty from the trash. It wasn't broken from the fall. It was just as it had been, with its faded blue dress, its cracked face, and that insufferable knowing smirk. For a long minute, I couldn't breathe. My mind was scrambling, trying to find the logical path through an impossible situation. I watched the garbage truck. I drove hundreds of miles. There was no way it could be here. This wasn't a prank anymore. This was something else. Panic clawed at my throat. I grabbed the doll. It felt colder now, the weight of it sinister, and got out of the truck looking around wildly. I couldn't throw it in the trash again. That didn't work. I had to do something more permanent. I needed to destroy it or lose it where it could never be found. With the doll on the floor of the cab, wrapped in a dirty shop rag like it was a body, I drove out of the truck stop and turned off the highway onto a unmarked dirt road that led deep into the desert. Miles from anything, with only the moon and my headlights for company. I stopped. The silence of the desert at night is a profound thing. It's a silence that absorbs all sound. I got out carrying the doll and walked away from the road until the truck was just a pair of glowing eyes in the distance. I found a deep, dry wash carved under the earth like ancient flash floods. This was it. First, I tried to break it. I raised it high over my head and slammed it against a large flat rock. Instead of shattering into 1,000 pieces, as porcelain should, it just made a dull thud, and a new thin crack appeared across its forehead. I did it again and again, my grunts of effort echoing in the stillness. It wouldn't break. It felt like I was trying to smash a solid block of marble. Giving up, I started digging a hole with my bare hands, the dry, sandy soil scraping my skin. I dug until my fingers were raw, a shallow grave just deep enough to conceal the doll. I placed it inside, face up. For a second, in the moonlight, I swore its smirk widened. I quickly covered it with dirt, then rolled a helly boulder, one that took all my strength to move, on top of the spot. I backed away, breathing heavily, my front pounding with a mixture of terror and exertion. I had buried it under a rock, in the middle of the Arizona desert, miles from any road. There was no coming back from that. By the time I reached Phoenix to drop my load, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept in 2 days, surviving on caffeine and sheer nerve-shredding adrenaline. My hands trembled constantly. I felt like I was being watched, every second of every minute. The memory of the doll's vacant blue eyes was burned into the back of my eyelids. After unloading my cargo, the first thing I did was tear my truck apart. I emptied the cab completely. I checked under the seats, in the overhead compartments, inside the sleeper's mattress. I checked the toolbox, the glove compartment, even under the hood. Nothing. The cab was empty, sterile. For the first time in days, I felt the flicker of hope. Maybe the burial had worked. Maybe the haunting had just been my exhausted mind playing tricks on me. I had a new load to pick up. A shipment of electronics bound for California. It was a fresh start, new state, new cargo, new highway. I bought a cheap cooler, stocked it with food and water, and made a vow not to stop until I hit the state line. I drove out of Phoenix as the sun set, the city lights shrinking in my mirrors. The road was open, and I was making good time. The ghostly whispers and phantom music had faded. It was just me and the engine again. I almost felt normal. I reached into my personal duffel bag, which I kept on the passenger seat, to grab a fresh shirt. My fingers brushed against something hard and cold. Silk and cracked porcelain? I stopped the truck so fast I was thrown against my seatbelt. I didn't even need to look. I already knew. I tipped the bag over, and it rolled out onto the seat. The doll. It was covered in sand and grit from its grave, but otherwise unharmed. The heavy rock, the miles of desert, they meant nothing. A wave of pure, hopeless rage washed over me. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. This thing, this curse was ruining me. I wasn't going to bury it. I was going to erase it from existence. I pulled over in a desolate stretch of I-10. From my emergency kit, I took out a flare, a can of engine degreaser, and a bundle of old rags. I built a small pyre on the gravel shoulder of the road. I placed the doll on top. It stared up at me with those same placid, painted eyes. I drenched the entire thing in the flammable degreaser and struck the flare. It erupted into a whoosh of greasy black smoke and orange flame. I watched, my face illuminated by the fire, as the faded blue dress blackened and disintegrated. I saw the paint on the doll's face begin to blister and peel away from the heat. The porcelain itself glowed a dull, angry red in the heart of the flames. The smirk seemed to twist into a full-blown, heat-cracked grin of agony, or maybe ecstasy. I stood there until the fire died down to a pile of smoldering embers. There was nothing left but a blackened, vaguely doll-shaped lump of porcelain and ash. I kicked it apart with my boot, grinding the pieces into the gravel. I drove away without looking back. The acrid smell of burnt plastic and ancient evil filling my cab.
It didn't stop driving for 12 hours straight. I crossed into California, my truck smelling faintly of smoke, and pushed on through the night, a man running from a ghost. I didn't hear any music. I didn't see any phantoms in my mirrors. There was only a profound and terrifying silence in the cab, a silence that felt like a held breath. Near dawn, utterly spent, I pulled into a brightly lit service plaza packed with other trucks. Safety in numbers, I thought. I killed the engine and just sat there for a long time, the silence of the cab pressing in on me. The ordeal was over. I had fought the monster and won. I finally allowed my exhausted body to relax. And that's when I felt the cold. A deep, unnatural chill, focused entirely on the passenger's side of the cab. My head turned slowly, unwillingly. It was sitting there. It was horrifying. The porcelain was blackened and scorched. Its once pale skin was now a hellish landscape of soot and shadow.
Its hair was gone, burned away to a few melted stubs. The silk dress was a collection of charred rags hanging from its body. But the most terrible part was the face. But fire had widened the cracks, and its mouth, the little smirk, was now a gaping, black-lipped grin. Its blue eyes, untouched by the flames, stared out from the burned mask of its face, brighter and more aware than ever. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. All the fight had gone out of me. I just stared at it, and a terrible understanding dawned on me. I couldn't get rid of it. Tossing it away only made it come back. Burying it only made it angry. Burning it only made it stronger. It didn't want to be discarded. It didn't want to be destroyed. It wanted to be seen. It wanted to ride. That story the waitress told me was wrong. The dolls in Eminence didn't vanish. They were chosen. They attached themselves to people, to travelers just passing through. They were a curse you picked up, like a stray dog on the side of the road, a parasite that's fed on loneliness and fear. That was a long time ago. My life is different now. I still drive this rig, but I'm never alone. She sits there, on the passenger seat, my co-pilot. I keep a clean piece of silk draped over her, so other drivers don't see the worst of the burns. Sometimes on the long, quiet nights, I find myself talking to her, telling her about the road, about the weather, and sometimes I swear I feel her cold presence shift just a little, as if she's listening. So if you're ever driving through a small, forgotten town and you hear a local legend you don't believe, be careful, very careful, because some stories aren't just stories. They're invitations. And if you find a little crack doll has somehow appeared among your things, don't try to fight it. You'll only make it angry. Just accept your new passenger, because once it chooses you, the ride never ends.